Hey, everybody. Michael McGinnis here. How are you? Yes, no, I'm over here. Hey, who's that? Who's that? Hey, no, wait a minute. That's me. No, no, no. Who's that? Who's that? Oh, no. Tom's there. Okay, no, hello, everybody.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Well, this is good because talking about sort of twists and turns and things like that, that's sort of what we're going to go into tonight's conversation is isn't it interesting, right? Is that for a common denominator amongst the three of us and our other members that are dealing with challenges in life as well, sickness, recovering from surgery, etc., that we go through this process of enlightenment, sort of our purposeful effort to really go through and understand what life is about, deeper meaning. And for all of us, we shared a lot of that through our dear friend Tom Sawyer, the spiritual group that we attended. And there's this great view in a video, one of the favorite films, and that's The Razor's Edge. And that's with, amazingly enough, Bill Murray, early on in his career, but still the classic Bill Murray, in there going through a very tough time, coming to that point of pursuing enlightenment in his way of doing it, and then ultimately coming back. And is that challenge that we all face is initially, wow, there is meaning to life, there's wonderment, and wow, good, I'm going to go back and change the world, only to really to come back and realize is that no, we didn't get entitled to or get out of jail or get out of life pass. We're back immersed in it, and in it is all of life's challenges and issues and things that everybody else does. But sometimes what happens is our approach to dealing with these things that are different. So we're going to start talking about some of our challenges and how we're really pursuing them at this point, using our open, candid conversation, beginning with Sir Richard.
Hello, everyone. We're running on three of the five musketeers here, so we'll do what we can to keep this up for you. But what I wanted to talk about was the situations I've had recently with three different people, two of them connected and one completely separate, and how I addressed dealing with each of them. It felt new to me. It felt like that I was handling them in a different way than I would typically would have. Uh, so I'll jump in. Two of them are my granddaughters, both 10 years old, stepsisters, and they don't always get along, as 10-year-old girls would sometimes go in and out. But one of the situation we have, what I'm living with, is one of them is autistic, and somewhere on the autism scale. We don't really know for sure. And the other is fierce, just incredibly fierce, but scared too. Uh, and so the interactions between them, the difficulties they have learning to get along, for nearly a year, the autistic one has tried to avoid the other in the house, like running to a different room. The house you can go in a circle in the first floor of the house, and she'll outright work to avoid being in the same room at the same time, which hurts the other one's feelings a lot. It looks mean when you see it. It's very frustrating to see because it it upturns the dynamics of the household a lot, and it leaves you with this feeling that the under the heading of the inmates are running the asylum. Everything revolves around how those, not everything, but so much ends up running around how those kids are going to get along, because they can be absolutely miserable to spend time with when they're not doing well. So I have tried being the kindly old grandfather. I've tried being the the clown. I got the chokes, the tricks, the juggling, the magic tricks, and everything. Um, I try, and that stuff would work for a short time, and then it didn't work anymore. It was stuff coming out of my head. Then and then uh, it got controlling. It's like, you have to do this. Now get up, do this now. Never mind what your sister's doing. You've got to do this now. We got to get out of the house to go to school. We got to go wherever it is we got to do. Just coming down with a sense of control of the situation. And that really blew up in my face. Things got much worse when I tried that. The other things didn't work. That one blew up. So I sat back for a while and really had to look at myself. What am I doing? What am I putting into this situation? The and you got to get pretty honest with myself. I had to get pretty honest with myself to notice, to realize what I was putting into it and what the results of it were, and it hurt when I saw the problems I was causing by how I was trying to handle it. It hurt. That hurt. I made some apologies to each of them and understood that I've really got to come from a completely different place. And I wish I could explain better what I did, but for a day, my son, his wife, and the two kids are headed out to Vermont. They got an 8-hour drive to get to Vermont. They're going to spend a week there, and then they're going to come back. And typically, if they go somewhere for even a 1-hour drive, it's a miserable time if these girls aren't getting along. And I don't know how to explain how, I came to the point of I simply have to love them as they are. Just just love them as they are. Just um, see them openly, without judgment, and without adding anything of mine to in terms of what they should be. And as I helped them load the car and get into the car, I was just, the best I can say, the word that comes to mind is I was just natural with them, lovingly natural with them. Uh, to jump back to some of our previous conversations about ego, the, the, the what I've come to understand of ego is that it's all in the head stuff. This is what I think about me. This is what I think about there. This is where I judgment have. Look at me, I'm so wonderful, or oh, I'm so terrible, or whatever. But aside from all of that mental stuff, each person comes into this life with particular talents available to them. And if you can come honestly from your heart through the talents, then the ego is not involved. As long as the clarity required to know, to be clear that you're coming from your heart through your talents is was an impressive thing to me to try and get to. But what that ended up doing was I got each kid giggling about something a couple of times before they got finally packed into the car and off they went on this 8-hour drive. Wish them luck, had a grand time being in a house that was empty. No one's fighting, no one's yelling, no one's blah, 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 all that stuff. They came back and I talked to and I asked them, well, how was it? How was the trip? Okay. And that was all the girls said. I got a chance to sit and talk with my son and daughter-in-law, and they said the girls chatted happily all the way to Vermont, the whole 8 hour trip. Got along fine the whole 7 days they were up there, and then chatted happily all the way back, and have stayed doing that for the week since. They're off on a camping trip right now, and we're so many times over this past year, the autistic one tries to avoid the other. I dropped by to see them last night, and they're both sitting next to each other at a table in the pop-up camper, chatting and drawing. I I cannot take credit for that. That seems to be touching ego stuff. But the recognition that if I'm right in that I was coming honestly through from the heart through my talents, perhaps that had an effect on them. It, I was dealing with them in a way that felt quite different than I had been dealing with them for the previous year. And it seems to have made a difference. I don't want to claim, hey, look at me, I did this, I made this go better. But it looks like how I was dealing with them as they left is something they were very, very open to. You know, they didn't have to be open to it, but they were open to it. And it seems to have worked for this long, a couple of weeks now. The other the other situation, okay, I have to speak in generalities. It needs to be confidential. But I've been talking with a fellow who's having his own problems, and by extension, having problems with his son. And when I first started talking to him, I was lost. I didn't know how to handle, how to talk to him, what I was going to do. I got a little desperate about who could I get turned to for some help to deal with this guy. Um, but somehow, each time I talked to him, I somehow something would come to mind that I would say that he would get quiet about, and that little bit of thing kept growing each time we talked. And the last time we had a conversation, uh, I somehow it was the best the best description I can give is that I was listening to something coming in over my shoulder, and was just whatever that was that was coming in. I was turning that into English language. We ended really well, had a good conversation. He had to go, I had to go, da 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 da. But I since then have gotten a couple of texts saying how fantastic it was and how beautiful the meeting with his son went. And I'm looking at the concept of coming honestly from the heart through whatever talents you have, uh, and seemingly, boy, it seems like that has made a dramatic difference in these three people's lives, and by extension to the people close to them. Uh, Someone asked me if I could explain what that is, um, and it comes under all I can think. What comes to mind so often are cliches. It's like the head isn't supposed to be in charge. The heart is supposed to be in charge. We tend to think our way through things. I certainly have for most of my life. Think about this, think about that. How can I address? How can I talk? What can I say? Blah, blah, blah. but the head's trying to be in charge and the heart is like trying to be heard. But if you can reverse that in these times of authenticity, where you're listening to the heart and the head is in service to that, that seems to be the quality we're really looking for. That seems to be, like keep. And of course, I immediately want to expand that, and that would be useful to the whole world. That would be the. But all I've got is my life. What can I attain that more often as I go through life, as I go through the hours of my day? Uh, this is what's been on my mind.
Well,
Who's next?
Richard, I appreciate very much your sharing from the heart. All right, that was about yeah, I think you were because you really cared. And I say that truly intently, um, and can relate to a lot of what you've said. I'll come back to that later, but just sort of summarize what I heard you say is that you know here were a couple of different situations, and you explained a brief part of the conversations. There were challenges, and that there was something that occurred to you, and you use the words, a thought or something coming over your shoulder, whatever, something that came to you that you accepted and acted upon. Fair to say?
Yeah,
And from that, there was a consequences in each time that suggest that, wow, maybe I made a difference. Maybe I made an impact. Fair to say?
yeah,
Yeah. And I'd love to be able to expand on that too, because I know, Tom, I think of you as your story about when you were at the Berlin Wall and that you had consciously worked to make a difference, to send love, right? Only to then see consequences from that happen. And I can remember you saying is that, and you feel like you really made in part a difference. So there was some recognition that you were a part of it. Where Richard, there was a hesitancy because it could be perceived as ego or too egotistically. Fair to say?
yeah.
So I just want to sort of summarize that too, and then turn it over to Tom for your thoughts on it, and then I'll share my own.
That's exactly what was going through my mind, Michael. Uh, was this when we're doing what our heart tells us or leads us to do, there will be an effect, and to you're going to see it. And so the question for you is, well, am I being egotistical by acknowledging it or owning that I had an impact on that situation? That was exactly my thought, Michael. Um, and what I would say about that, well, you can't help but notice it. And in fact, what are you going to do? You're going to just, well, I don't know. I'm just out there in the dark. I may have some effect. I don't know. I mean, in a sense, it's reassuring. It's encouraging because we want to keep doing the right thing. We want to be helpful. We want to do things that are healing. We want to have a positive impact. So if we were getting, I mean, you could have gotten the opposite. You should have said, well, I didn't see any effect at all, just because you didn't notice it, or you may have ignored it,
Yeah,
or just discounted it and say, well, that's just my ego. I didn't have anything to do with that. And then after a while, if you keep saying that, you probably quit trying. You'd probably do
yeah,
less and less of that. So it's I think it's okay, that you're seeing it, and you're acknowledging to us hey, and showing that you're not being egotistical. You didn't go tell those people that you did that. You didn't go to them. That would be egotistical.
Right.
Or if you wrote an article, I did this, and here's what happened. Or if you went to those people and said, well, I hope you're happy because look what I did for you.
You owe me
Um,
money.
yeah, right, right, exactly. So obviously, you're not being egotistical. I mean, just from us being able to feed back to you right now, that I didn't hear anything egotistical, quote unquote, about that. I did hear the struggle of the ego. You're acknowledging that the judgment, I guess you could say, of yourself. Am I being egotistical? And at some point, I don't know if we're supposed to do that, if we're just kind of constantly supposed to keep on guard, if each day we're supposed to look at ourselves and say, am I being egotistical today? What have I done today that was egotistical? And if we kept focusing on that, we wouldn't do anything. We would probably be so self-conscious that we would say, well, I don't want my ego to be involved in this. So I guess there's a point at which um, maybe it's always in the back of our mind, but we don't let it dominate. We just kind of go on, and as we get older, we see in more and more. I do anyway, of the effect that I've had. And I think our sharing here, since it's such a small circle, I mean, we're not going out into, you know, public radio, or we're not
Right.
touching thousands and thousands of people. This is an intimate sharing, and a model for whoever does happen to view this, but more for ourselves to talk about these things and to feedback to each other and to vent a little bit sometimes, to try out ideas, to lay it out there and say, well, here's what's happening and what I did, and that's the beauty of it. That we're not under the microscope. We're allowing ourselves to share just authentically, as you say, what our experiences are, and that's what the beauty of this forum is. It's allowing us to share without judgment, either from each other or ourselves. I'm just laying it out there. I'm just laying this out there. This is an experience I had, and sometimes from the feedback that we get, it's useful to have feedback and to have a witness. This witness idea came up at this memorial I was just at for my brother. My brother's wife died about a month ago, and we had the memorial over this past weekend, and lots and lots of layers of this. One thing that happened, it kind of fits into this a little bit. When she had a stroke, and it was sudden, and in the process of trying to get her out of the hospital and get her home, they got involved with hospice. This was out in Oregon, or in Washington, actually. Um, and it was complicated. Things weren't working exactly right, but they finally did get her home, and hospice just wasn't working out the way it was supposed to for them. She was on a feeding tube, and had a thing up their nose and all that, and unconscious. And so it's beginning to irritate my brother, because hospice, it wasn't working like he thought hospice was supposed to work. They finally did get her home, and things still weren't working right with hospice. And the hospice nurse didn't come, and she ended up, they had to call 911 because she started to choke, and there was no hospice person there. And so, because the emergency folks came, they were the one. Somebody had to be able to take all that out. Had to be an official person to remove the respirate, whatever it was. Michael, you would know more about this than any of us, but they had to remove this. And in the process, before hospice could get there, and they said, well, hospice leader isn't supposed to come in until 5 o'clock or something. I mean, it was like nobody was there to help them. And she died when, in the process of all of this. And and he felt guilty because he had called 911. Um, and that was a mistake, as he thought, because that made it very uncomfortable to be around. And instead of a peaceful environment where they were all around their mom and around his wife with her as she passed, they had to stand back and let the EMT people do whatever they were doing. And in that process, she died. So he was very angry about that. And in discussing it, he and I, on Friday night, I guess, when the first night I was there, um, he was describing what happened after that, which was uh, they on their own, he and they came up with this whole scenario of they had a dress that they wanted her to wear, to put on her when she was uh, dying or passing or something. They already had the dress. And as you know, when somebody passes, they have an excrement often, and you have to clean that up. And so there was no hospice person there to do that. So my brother, because he was with me and my dad when my dad passed away, we took care of him. I think I shared that experience of taking care of my dad. He knew what to do because he had been through that with my dad, and because the family was there, the daughters and so forth. They developed this whole thing about cleaning her. They washed her. They put this dress on. They had a whole experience of taking care of her and nurturing her even after she had died that they would not have had hospice been there. Hospice was just done all that. Yeah, I'll take care of that. And so, in our discussion, it became kind of obvious that really that was a blessing. It's something that turned out to be um, a good way for the family and a way that they would not have experienced to honor her in that moment. And it wasn't just the moment of passing, but when you die, you're still aware of what's going on for quite a while. And so I'm sure that that his wife, was touched, tremendously by the experience of having them touch her and dress her and wash and put the dress on. And he was crying when he was talking about this, that she was beautiful. She was glowing after they did all this, and she was laying there. It was just so touching for him to experience what they got to experience. And then I pointed out, well, you wouldn't have had that experience had it weren't for the circumstance that happened. And sometimes those things occur that way for a reason, and it's not easy to to let go of the anger about how it happened and judgment. This should have happened that way. This should have happened that way, and so forth. So, anyway.
Wow.
Yeah, thanks, Tom, too,
My
for. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Richard.
It's okay. Um, yeah, my concerns with ego comes from having been so egotistical in the past, being aware of, oh man, I screwed that up sometime after an event, and having other people telling me like, you got a problem with ego, buddy. You better check that out. So that's where all my concern for my ability to discern whether
Mhm.
I'm coming from my ego or not.
Mhm.
I have made big messes. And I recently have been working on the story of having met the Dalai Lama with the clown nose and whatnot. And in a writing group, been explaining, writing it up in such a way that that concept of removing the ego makes sense to people who aren't involved or just normal people, not interested in spiritual things or whatnot. Uh, and how at that time, to get my ego out of the way, spirituality arranged for me to run up and down those hills in Dharamsala for miles and miles at the thin atmosphere, so that I could only be natural and spontaneous. And that way, I became a lens for a healing facilitated upon the Dalai Lama. And if I had had my at that time, if I had been in my ego, I'd have just gotten in the way. So writing this up now and helping me be aware of it's all on my mind a lot recently. So that's an explanation for why it's not there endlessly forever and ever and ever, but
Yeah.
it's an important point for me at the moment.
Well,
And
I
then
didn't experience you being egotistical
well, thank you.
just now.
Thank you.
So.
That's how good I am. Oh.
That's right. You did a really good job, Richard.
Did a really good job. The best you ever saw, man. My humility is so huge.
That's the best I ever saw of someone that let go of their ego.
All right. And we got it on tape. So the world will know. I'm sorry, interrupted you, Mike. Go ahead.
No, it was great. I'm enjoying the conversation, and I just picking up a lot of these great points. And as Tom was talking, you know, uh, he really brought in, his own situation and just how the looking at a situation with judgment, which is a characteristic of ego, expectation. Um, and although it didn't happen initially, that his brother was very upset with it, but yet a sort of an ending is there's this natural order to things. And in this natural order of things, that in effect was perfect, meant to be the way it is. Would that be a fair assessment, Tom?
Yeah, better than it would have been otherwise. I mean, a more perfect outcome, an outcome that they couldn't have planned on. Um, but also probably for him at some point, in order to get to that place, I think something had to have happened in him to start the wheels turning for that alternate experience rather than continuing to be angry about it. And it's not my brother to to be an angry person like that and to not let things go. I mean, I think he's an enlightened being in many ways without necessarily having the terminology about that. He's had a full and rich life and a very wise person in his way. So I think his wisdom, he recognized that it wasn't productive for him to hold on to that anger and that could make something out of it.
Yep.
And that's one of the values that he always expressed about his wife. She was Vietnamese, and they came over. They were in Laos and during the war, and they narrowly escaped death. And my brother was instrumental in helping her entire family get out of the war area there. And I mean, there's a whole lot about that, but that's something that she taught him, and he learned from her story and in their relationship about survival and about you know staying with uh, you know working through very very difficult situations. And it was a value that she taught him, and I think he recognized it and learned it from her or from their relationship, and it came forth in the moment. It materialized.
Yep. And yet you two were a part of that. by that Friday night, right? By being there and willing to
Yeah,
have the
having that
conversation.
conversation. So to him to realize, yeah, that was a, I mean, that was a blessing, you know, and that what you did was right on,
Yeah.
you know, with what needed to happen, and that was a good thing, and not to feel guilty about having called 911. You know, he thought he had done the wrong thing,
Yeah.
um, and was carrying that around. I mean, that's part of the conversation that he was feeling guilty about that, and he let go of that
Well,
just before, you know.
enjoying again the conversation because the way I like to see things is, back to the sort of the topic is we've each achieved a degree of enlightenment, whatever that means, right? There's this awareness of greater sense of life, a lot of specific work effort has gone into that. I know for the three of us. Uh, and so again, there's a couple of examples in terms of how we approach things today. Richard, you approached the situation, by heeding this voice, right? And did things and used the degree of reflection that you had to make the connection between your willingness to heed that advice and making a difference that although could be read as ego, could also be read as, hey, so listen to this voice more often, right? As a message, it's not ego, which is what you're hearing from both Tom and me. Tom and his story is his own experience, with his own wife's death and bringing that whole experience into his brother just losing his wife, and being there, being a catalyst, being a whatever, to allow some conversation to come through to a greater awareness of it. I think that that's my sense in terms of how I would describe what happens post enlightenment. Even though we don't get out of life or get out of jail card or free ourselves from the challenges of life, our awareness, our sense, our abilities and things have expanded, are different. And we each have that unique set of what they are. Sometimes there's commonalities of it, sometimes there's not. And also within our personalities is sometimes the struggle of accepting it. I mean, there are those who are still more focused on the ego, would have an experience like Richard, and the next day would be hanging out a sign is I'm a great psychic, right? And I'm going to go sell my services, right? And again, and even that could be said with a degree of judgment, because it could be that the message they got, and maybe that's how they provide some great worth, right? To who to know. But for sake of our discussion, there is what we can typically see the egotistical response to things, um, of which you, Tom, and I, and many others have somewhat tempered because of our experience. And also in our personality. And I think, Richard, this is where you and I connect because of the difficult past we have, self-esteem affected, other things that tends to put a cast of doubt on anything good that we do. And I can speak for myself, I'll feel that well, who am I? Right? Growing up with the you're not worthy, you'll amount to nothing. Those things have been long lasting effects. And man, as much as I've worked on it, they still rear their ugly head, today. It's the go-to for me. But what's different is that I recognize it now and I begin to go do the work. And it goes through and it's like I've got this phase. I can write it down as to this cycle. Something negative happens. Immediately, I'm guilty. I'm ashamed. I'm the bad person in this. You know, uh, yes, we all are contributing, but I know I overdo that. That then turns into a degree of guilt and shame. Then that leads into a degree of depression where I start to feel that way. However, what's built into me now is that depression can only go so far before I now know that the tools that exist, affirmations, reading books, going to YouTube for me is one of my favorite things to do because built in there are Abraham Hicks, Eckhart Tolle, near-death experience collection, that I go to, and I'll click on one of them, and it seems like in every case, there's like, oh my God, this is so much directly relates to my situation, right? And so that does it. Now, you would think is probably after having 30 years of that, I guess I would say 30 years since I've had my enlightenment phase, that I would have that down pat right now, but I don't. And I can feel ashamed, go to depression or whatever else on that. But I realize that there's a process, and that's what's different now. And the irony is I would say is that probably true for many people, but I can definitely say for myself, I am so much better. I so much better in cases where I'm dealing with somebody else. It's like then because my drama is not going on in my head and I'm working with somebody else, honestly, and this is again, this is where Richard, I would struggle with the ego, but I'm going to work through that to say that what I've come to accept is I do have a gift in being able to much more readily see and understand other situations and to be able to respond in a very helpful, healing way that I've seen and many times has made a difference. Um, and so that's great. I honor that. It's a wonderful thing. And it took me a long time to get over that from an ego perspective. However, when I try to do that with myself, you know, that's where, I'll be damned is as if all my personal drama, and I'll use that to sort of categorize or characterize what I just described before, my own personal issues that are there get in the way. They create this fog. Um, and I sort of have to follow through that process of shame and guilt and anger and frustration and all of those things there to go through this cycle of which now I could say is down to probably within a day, now, whereas it used to be a week, sometimes a month, sometimes years, earlier in my life. But that's this new process that's evolved. And that's why when Tom also, I'm going to relate to a point Tom mentioned earlier about our conversations here. Our conversations here are very intimate, authentic. I think, Tom, you used those words and I thought they were perfect. And I hope do role model to others. And if they find a way to somebody else, to be able to come to understand that you probably experienced some of these same things, feeling the same kind of things, and how good it is to be able to have others that you can intimately and authentically relate to share with, because that's the real value I get from these sessions is that it's okay to be me. It's okay. And and that relates to just another piece of my enlightenment is God. I thought I was different before, but that would have been characterized as being weird because I wasn't like the other guys. I wasn't popular. I was struggled, very sensitive in nature, so on and so on and so on. And that was all again used to support that low self-esteem, that I should be ashamed of myself, so on and so forth. But then with enlightenment, it furthered that. It was like, now I'm all of those things. Plus, I think differently now. I want to talk about life. I want to talk about meaning. I talk about death comfortably and openly. And again, it's fewer and fewer circles that those come in to. So I really value the group, and what I really recommend to others, the value of the connection that you can find with others, that you can share openly and intimately, with, as Richard did here with us, as Tom did with his brother, and as I'm doing here with all of you in the world, is opening up and just name it, claim it, and understand that the end of it, that it's okay. It's okay. And that's the part that I probably have the most difficult time working on, is a conclusion that it's okay. And that's probably about a day and a half to 2 days, but it comes sometimes a little longer, that it's okay. Everything was perfect. That my role here is not to sit there and beat up on myself. That's not the God I know would want that. that it's time to really love and accept myself just the way I am. I know I've learned a lot from this experience, and it's time to move on. And I begin to move on and start making more positive choices. So it's a challenge, and I appreciate just the culmination of our sharing here. That's some of my thoughts related to what we're talking about.
Yeah, totally. I think, Richard, you were, for somebody to have told you you're being egotistical, I I would step back a little bit and say, well, what were you challenging in them? I mean, you said that you maybe thought you were being you've I guess claimed that to some
Yeah,
extent,
yeah.
that yeah, I was being egotistical. Um, but in that process of of recognizing the ego, that's the only way you could recognize that. I mean,
Yeah.
you had to confront it. You had to had feedback from somebody, and apparently you made use of that feedback. You were able to take it in and say, okay, I'll assess this. Some people wouldn't do that. They would just get angry, and their list of friends would get smaller and smaller. And they would have less and less positive effect on the world. So, and my sense is, uh, given the experience that you and Michael had, you probably needed to bolster your ego. You
Oh,
probably
yeah.
needed a stronger ego, and that was what was happening. And you were attempting to to strengthen your ego because you had probably a very weak ego prior to that. And so by doing that, it was just a matter of finding the boundary, finding the right level of ego, um, positivity, or how much ego is appropriate, appropriate ego. And so that you were getting your boundaries set, and recognize that. So that, that's okay. You don't have to feel guilty about having been an egomaniac in the past. You
Needed
had,
needed it to try and bolster the self esteem
yes,
to be
you
willing to keep living.
absolutely. I mean, you needed to be stronger, and
Yeah.
so that might have appeared to someone else that you're overcompensating. I mean, and it was probably what you were doing. I mean, you were overcompensating, and you needed a limit, or you needed to find out what's the appropriateness and how far to go with that. So, you know, our divine presence also gives us that opportunity. And those don't always seem like, it sometimes seems like we made a mistake. And that's what, Mike, you're saying. It's okay. It's okay that happened, because that was the spirit showing you, here's, you're going to get feed, here it is, and this is where it is. And that's a process, and sometimes painful process, but nonetheless, we learn.
Right. Yeah. And for me, one of the main people to tell me that was Tom Sawyer. I, personally, I kind of found it kind of hard to ignore him or tell him he's full of beans when he's saying,
Yeah,
letting me.
you know, that's good though. I mean, you
Yeah.
were, just the fact that that we all had that relationship with Tom Sawyer. He didn't come for nothing, you know.
Right.
Right. I mean, that's part of the relationship. That's part
Yeah.
of what he was offering to us, was to be honest,
Yeah.
and to be authentic, as we have said, and to lay it out there. It's not bullshitting. I mean, excuse me,
Yeah.
BSing. He
One of the uh, one of the helpful pieces of advice he gave me was that I should have a small piece of glass about the size of a quarter, and round the edges, smooth the edges so they won't cut. It should be clear glass, and then put that in my belly button so I can see where I'm going when I got my head up there.
Oh,
Valuable piece of information. That really caused me to reconsider, what am I doing? What am I thinking? What am I thinking about? What am I doing? That that uh, that was a good brain duster. The pow.
the topic of ego to me brings up something I've felt as I've lived in spiritual circles and things, is that we can tend to connotate things that have maybe a largely negative influence like the ego, but we can perceive it to the point that all or any ego equals bad. And I don't, that's the challenge at times that I see. This is ego. Tom, you were talking about is I loved how Tom tied it to you, because it related as very much to me. Is an ego at some point gave me an identity, right? So I had to do that, because before I didn't see myself as having any identity. I was worthless, ashamed, so forth. And having an ego at times gave me a sense of identity. So I really love that, Tom. I appreciate your sharing that. That was really instrumental to me. Um, but that was a case of where ego was good. And even in the work, there are days that I do something, I develop something, I create something, and I feel really proud about that. Now, pride can often be equated to ego, but is that a bad thing? So we also sometimes to be careful about labeling something. And I found that to be the case of a lot of different concepts I learned spirituality is that there's a middle ground here. I would typically go from one end of the pendulum to the other end, only to get frustrated because I felt I had to be this other person over on the end of the spectrum. But then I found, but in being me, I sort of had to be somewhere in the balance.
Yeah, that's really um, that's interesting about the issue of pride, having pride in your work. I mean, what's wrong with having pride in your work, right? I mean, if you do a good job, you should know that, and you should be able to say that was a good job. I'm proud of that work. That means that I own it. I can put my name. That was something that I've heard from old timers many times about. That's something I can sign, or that's something I could put my name on,
Yeah,
and that I wouldn't be ashamed of having done that. you
right.
know and that there's a pride in work that is often, I mean, I hear talked about that people don't seem to have pride in their work these days. I hear some of the old timers saying that. I'm an old timer now. I can say that too. uh, I see people just do a halfway job, or to just go and do the job and not really care about how good it was. I just got my paycheck and I did the minimum whatever I could do. um, so taking pride in the work isn't, I don't think, necessarily about you. It's about the work. It's about what you're doing. That is the best. Because you're offering something, you're building something. You're going to build a good building. I mean, goodness sakes, look at the building that collapsed in Florida. I mean, somebody didn't take pride in their work there, probably, or they didn't take pride in taking care of that space.
Yeah,
It was just, well, it'll be all right. And, I don't know. And half of those people are dead. I mean, the people that built that are dead now. The construction people, who knows, how sloppy that work was. And there's a result, years later. And so that could be with anything that we're doing, taking pride in helping somebody, or taking pride in how you accomplish a task. And that if you take pride in it, you're doing it because you want it to be as good as you can do it. not because you want to be seen as special. You want to do a good job.
Yep. Yeah, being a mechanic, I ran into a lot of those people where, yep, I put my name to that.
Mm-hmm.
With something they built or repaired or whatever. And I feel that way myself about a lot of things. It's a kind of a difference between I'm proud of that, I'm proud of me.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. I'm pleased with me. I'm proud of that and I'm pleased with
I feel
myself.
good about what I did. You
Yes,
know, I,
exactly.
I did a good job, and
Yep.
and I can sleep with that.
Yeah.
I'd go to bed on that.
Yep. Satisfied and content.
Which that I really like, because this self-acknowledgement is so important to the process, um, and can be perceived as ego because it's about self. And I like how it was just described there too, is to be pleased with what you have done, is an important part to uh, authenticate, value, appreciate, love self, right? As much as important as is to do it with anybody else. And sometimes we don't, express that as a valuable thing, because yes, we see examples of which it gets overdone, right? To become more ego.
Mm.
But I know that's one of the things that I probably, how many times I've been in counseling is I've heard the same expression, might just take some time to stop and look in the mirror and just love and accept that person just for who that person is, right? Accept that. And that's like, that was such a powerful healing technique, as has been for me and continues to be for me today. But that should not be considered ego in that way, or a negative
Right.
aspect of ego.
Okay, we got it.
Right.
And we talked it to death. Are we all proud of ourselves? Done.
Boy, we did a good job.
We are fantastic, I tell you. Nobody does it better than us.
Yeah. I don't know why anybody would want to watch this. They got to feel so bad about themselves after hearing all of our wisdom and expertise. What, you know.
Well, it's natural when you're so wonderful. It's just happen.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
But that's what clowning is about, Richard. Is the being humble. To make fun of yourself is to keep that in check, to keep
Yeah.
that ego in check, and it's one way of doing it. Humor is one way of doing that. Um, and I know there's a bunch of other ways, but you're right. I mean, Michael, it is important to feel okay about yourself. You know, and if you've made a mistake, you made a mistake, and what are you going to do about that? You're going to just beat yourself up, and say, well, I'm a terrible person. I made that terrible mistake and I'm not worth anything anymore. And I should just go bury my head under the sand and give up. Um, that's not helpful. You know, if you honor the mistake like Richard did, he heard Tom say, he heard what he said, and he made, he worked on it, and it challenged him.
Good.
And Tom didn't do it to make you feel bad. You know.
No, it's clearly another beautiful brain duster because like maybe the more subtle things weren't getting through. So the thing about the piece of glass would break down the walls.
Right.
Wow, it was a great session. And again, I think paramount to this is our openness, candidness, and authenticity is to great way to role model to others just the kind of connection that you can have with people by sort of letting go of this perception or image that we've got to be perfect or we've got to have all of the answers or we can't demonstrate our weaknesses. It's really a part of evolving. And I know I've gotten that question times from conversations is people actually sat back and they've recognized me at those times, which has been talking about ego felt pretty good. But and they'd ask the question, so can you help sort of describe, this process? What is this process of enlightenment being? And I'd love to just sort of get your own thoughts as a way to sort of conclude tonight. And I'd say as well, to me, the essence of it is it's really all about awareness, and awareness is a double-edged sword. As you grow and as you continue to grow, the journey often becomes more difficult. And it's because with the awareness that we've gained, we're now responsible for it. And we hold ourselves responsible for it versus maybe in the past we would have let it go or blamed somebody else or kept the victim status or whatever else. But now we realize, no, I do know better. And I've got to hold myself accountable, and it's tough and it's challenging in that way, which is to me what supports that premise is when does your growth end? Well, I think in this life it's with your last breath, right? I mean, you continue to grow all the way through life, and it's those challenging situations that he has. And to me, in effect, is the growth is to really continue to work forward, to continue improving self and utilize the beliefs and things that you've existed and begin to integrate them in with your personality. And that's how I ultimately sort of see this connection between my spirituality, which is a collection of these beliefs that I've formed as a result of all of these experiences and awarenesses and stuff. And then the challenge becomes how to integrate them in with my day-to-day personality. Michael, a person I'm growing up with in this life, and is my skin, is my personality that's guiding along. And it's a full-time job as I'm finding that process of integrating. But within that, I could say the essence of it is I have become a better person. So if that's the gain of it, I'll take it. And that to me is what I describe as the meaning of life, because I believe we do come to something else. We do exit and go someplace else. It is not the end. So what I get to do in this life is sort of take this personality that I've been asked to integrate with as a soul, and to collect these bits of wisdom along the way, and then to challenge this personality in this sort of duality mode of me, myself, and I, to really continue to make a difference. And that to me is how I sort of describe the meaning, life, and benefit of really getting there. Because otherwise, I've seen people who have ended their lives angry, upset, in shame, or whatever. And that I really feel sad about. Accepting that there's a reason for it, but that there was an opportunity that that person could have had to really grow and develop themselves. But even by not growing, they were instrumental to me as a reminder that I don't want to die that way. I want to die happier, in peace, and that I gave it my all and that I've accomplished some major things. What about you guys? What do you see as the meaning of life?
I'm good with that. That you look just like we were talking about. I'll sign my name to that. To look back at your life and go, "Yep, I'll sign my name to that. I'm pleased with how I did."
Yeah, I would, something that has occurred to me from time to time, and the Berlin Wall incident reminds me of that, and of a number of others, of course. is that it's my time and place to do this. It's not an ego thing. This is my job. You know, this is my assignment for tonight. And I'm the only one that can do this. There are times when it's our job, it's specifically my mission to do certain things, maybe one thing, in my lifetime only. But if you feel within yourself that I need to do this, and you don't do it because of your ego or of a suppressed ego, let's say, or um, oppressed ego, where from the outside somebody's telling you you're no good, or maybe you're telling yourself, I'm not worthy of this. It's the whole Christian, I'm not worthy, a fundamentalist Christian. You're not worthy. I'm not worthy. Well, who is? And if we're here to do something and you feel like you're not worthy all the time, what are you going to do? Nothing. Jesus will do it. God will do it. Somebody else, the preacher will do it. You know, and so I'll just sit and pray and not do anything because I'm sure to make a mistake because I'm unworthy. So there's a judgment there, and so there are times when if you can recognize that enlightenment is just self-awareness, it's knowing yourself, and it's knowing something or knowing yourself or knowing your place and acting on that, you know not just knowing it, but doing, being, being that, and allowing the spirit to move through you. It's not us that's enlightened, it's spirit enlightening us. It's moving us. We're just a vessel for that, and allowing that to come into us is our job, really, is to allow spirit to move and act on it.
That's awesome. That's really good. I love the collective of this. We should bottle it if there's a way to do that. There's an elixir in here someplace. We do get
$50 a quart.
yes, it really is the essence of it because, amongst all of the pain and suffering things I've experienced in this life, and I feel I've come to grips with it and accepted that and uh, grown from it. What I can say, and it's sort of this, and this is sort of a proud thing to say, or because it feels good, sort of epitomizes my growth, is that I know that if I was confronting right now the end of my life, a gun to my head or whatever the circumstance was, that I feel okay. I'd be able to self-assess, reflect in those moments, those last moments there, and said, I did it. I did it. I worked really hard in my life. No, I was not perfect. Now I come to understand that that's what being human is all about. But man, I did it. I worked through the hoops. And I may have more lives to do, whatever is the outcome, but I did it. And that to me is what a valuable thing after the years of volunteering in hospice to see the pain and suffering people go through in their last moments because of the regrets they have, and no more runway to be able to acknowledge those other than forgiving themselves at that point. But to me is what an amazing thing to do. And to me, that's the greatest gift is imagine that you can come to your end of life feeling okay, if not good about it. All I know is that sounds awesome compared to coming to that point and not feeling very good about it. So with that in mind, great episode. I mean, this originated from a thought, Richard, into really a conversation, which is what we've done so often. And I thank you for that. I thank you all for the thoughts and comments and really beginning to delve into some pretty interesting, and deep concepts associated with the joint experience that we've had in life, that of enlightenment. All right.
I don't know a better way of ending it.
That's it. That's great. All right.
The cosmic joke, right?
There it is.
Don't take yourself so seriously. Lighten
Spot
up.
on.
That's enlightenment. Lighten up. You all right?
Lighten up.
Spot on. What a great way to conclude it. All right. Until next time.